The desert held its breath like a predator poised to strike, its red-gold claws stretching across the badlands where nothing tender dared to grow. Merciless heat shimmered above cracked earth that had forgotten the kiss of rain, while vultures circled overhead as if they already knew what the land had planned for Sarah Reynolds. Alone and heavy with child, she had been left to die in this unforgiving wilderness, her crime nothing more than carrying twin boys in her womb when her husband's family had demanded she deliver them an heir with a different name. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wagon had been abandoned beneath a stunted juniper, its single wheel shattered beyond repair. The canvas cover hung limp in the windless afternoon, offering meager shade against the brutal sun. Sarah's skin had once been pale as cream, marked with freckles that her husband Thomas had once traced with affection. Now it was burnt raw, her lips cracked and bleeding from thirst. Her blue calico dress, sodden with sweat, clung to the great swell of her belly. "Please," she whispered, though no one could hear. "Just a little longer." The contractions had started. At dawn, gentle at first, like the distant thunder of buffalo herds she'd heard when they first crossed the Missouri. But as the sun climbed higher, the pain grew sharper, more insistent. Sarah had helped birth calves and foals back on her father's farm in Pennsylvania, but nothing had prepared her for this. The way her body seemed to fold in on itself, the relentless pressure, the fear that threatened to consume her more completely than the heat. Her hands, once soft from tending house, were now calloused and raw. She had spent 3 days trying to repair the wagon wheel, using only the few tools left behind when they abandoned her. Each night, she had kept a small fire burning, hoping against hope that someone would see the smoke, that help would come. But only the coyotes had answered, their eerie calls a mocking echo of her desperation. Sarah had been 19 when she married Thomas Reynolds, the third son of a cattle baron whose ranch spread across the Wyoming territory like a kingdom. She had thought herself blessed, Thomas, with his gentle eyes and easy smile, promising her a life of adventure in the West. What a fool she had been. The first year had been difficult, but sweet. They lived in a small cabin at the edge of the Reynolds ranch, Thomas working from sunrise to sunset to prove himself to his father. Sarah had grown adept at making do with little, at stretching meals and mending clothes until they were more patch than original fabric. When she announced she was expecting, Thomas had swept her into his arms, joy radiating from him like heat from a stove. But that joy had turned to ash in his mouth when his father, Jeremiah Reynolds, made his expectations clear. The Reynolds name needed strong sons, not useless daughters. The old man had lost his eldest son to pneumonia, his second to a cavalry charge during the war. Thomas was his last hope for continuing the legacy he had built through blood and ruthless determination. "If she gives you a daughter," he had said. Over dinner one night, his eyes cold and hard as river stones, sent her back east where she belongs. Sarah had felt the weight of his disapproval pressing down on her, as if her body's choices were somehow a reflection of her worth. Thomas had defended her that night, his voice rising against his father's for the first time since she had known him, but seeds of doubt had been planted. He began to watch her with a shadow in his eyes, a question left unspoken. Would she fail him too? The accident happened 2 months ago. A frightened horse, a fall that no one had witnessed. By the time they found Thomas, broken at the bottom of a ravine, it was too late for anything but prayers. Sarah had wept until she thought her heart would stop, but Jeremiah Reynolds had stood at his son's grave dry-eyed, his mouth a thin line of bitter acceptance. "You'll stay until the child is born," he had told Sarah afterward, his voice devoid of warmth. "If it's a boy, he stays here to be raised as a Reynolds should be. If it's a girl—" He hadn't needed to finish the thought. The contempt in his eyes had made his meaning clear. Sarah had tried to make herself small to be useful despite her growing belly. She cooked for the ranch hands, mended, cleaned, but Jeremiah watched her with increasing disdain as her belly swelled larger than expected. Twins, the midwife had announced after examining her, a hint of worry in her weathered face. And soon, I'd say. That night, Sarah had overheard the conversation that would change everything. Twins are a curse, Jeremiah had said to his foreman. They split the inheritance, cause nothing but trouble. And if they're girls... He'd spat into the fire. Get rid of her. Take her far enough that she can't find her way back. The desert will take care of the rest. Fear had sent Sarah to the small box where Thomas had kept their savings, barely enough for a stagecoach ticket east. But when she tried to leave the next morning, Jeremiah's men were waiting. The money disappeared from her trunk. The ranch became a prison. 2 days later, the foreman and another hand had come for her before dawn. Time for a journey, Mrs. Reynolds, he'd said, his face carefully blank. They had loaded her into a wagon with a few supplies, not enough, she realized now, to keep anyone alive for long. They had traveled for 2 days, far beyond any landmark she recognized, until the wheel had broken in this desolate stretch of nothing. Mr. Reynolds sends his regrets, the foreman had said as they mounted their horses, leaving her with the broken wagon. But the Reynolds line don't need no twins, especially not if they're girls. Now, as another contraction rippled through her, Sarah bit back a scream. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the Badlands in blood-red hues that would soon give way to the killing cold of desert night. She had survived 3 nights alone, but she would not survive this birth without help. She thought of her mother, so far away in Pennsylvania. She had written of her marriage, her journey west, the coming child. Had those letters ever arrived? Would anyone even know where to look for her remains? The pain crescendoed, driving all thought from her mind. She gripped the edge of the wagon seat, breath coming in sharp gasps. When it receded, she forced herself to move, to gather what she needed. Clean cloths from her trunk, the last of her water, a knife that she had kept hidden in her boot. She arranged them beside a nest of blankets in the shade of the wagon. The next contraction brought her to her knees. She felt something shift, a pressure building that could not be denied. Sarah positioned herself as best she could, remembering the midwife's instructions from what seemed like a lifetime ago. God, she prayed, her voice a rasp in the stillness. If I die here, save my children. Send someone, anyone. The desert offered. No answer but the distant cry of a hawk. The sun slipped lower, shadows lengthening across the cracked earth. In the distance, heat mirages danced on the horizon, wavering like ghosts. Time lost meaning as Sarah's world narrowed to breath and pain, push and rest. The first child arrived as the sun touched the edge of the world, his cry strong despite the circumstances of his birth. Sarah cleaned him with trembling hands, wrapped him in a cloth torn from her petticoat, and placed him in the shade of the wagon. Henry, she named him, for her father, who had taught her to be strong. The second boy came harder, his passage sending waves of agony through her already depleted body. By the time he emerged, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. His cry was weaker, his tiny form more delicate than his brother's. James, she whispered, cradling him close. Her husband's middle name, a tenuous connection to the father these boys would never know. Sarah lay back, the twins nestled against her chest, too exhausted to move further. Blood pooled beneath her, more than there should have been. She knew what it meant, had seen it once when a neighbor's wife had died in childbirth. The desert would claim her after all, but perhaps the boys. Her gaze drifted to the horizon, where darkness was rapidly consuming the last vestiges of day. And there, was it another mirage, another trick of her failing vision? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. A figure approached on horseback, silhouetted against the dying light. Sarah clutched her sons closer, fear giving her a final surge of strength. Had Jeremiah's men returned to ensure her death? Or was this an even greater danger, a stranger who might see a woman alone as an opportunity? The rider drew nearer, his mount picking its way carefully across the broken ground. In the fading light, Sarah could make out a man seated tall and straight, his hair hanging in two long braids, adorned with beads that caught the last rays of sun. He wore a fringed buckskin shirt and carried a rifle across his saddle, though it remained untouched as he approached. A Sioux warrior. Sarah had heard stories, none of them comforting to a white woman alone in the wilderness. She tried to push herself upright, to appear less vulnerable, but her body betrayed her. Darkness edged her vision, threatening to pull her under. The twins began to cry, their voices thin but determined, calling out to a world that had already tried to reject them. The warrior dismounted a respectful distance away, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He spoke words she couldn't understand, his voice low and even. When she didn't respond, he switched to halting English. "You hurt?" he said, a statement rather than a question. Sarah's laugh was brittle, edged with hysteria. "Yes," she managed. "I'm hurt." He approached slowly, hands visible, empty of weapons. His face came into focus, younger than she had first thought, with eyes that held neither hostility nor pity, just careful assessment. "Babies," he said, nodding toward the twins. "New?" "Yes." Sarah clutched them tighter. "My sons." He knelt a few feet away, still keeping a respectful distance. "I am Chetan," he said, touching his chest. "Who leaves woman with new babies here?" The question contained no judgment, only a practical curiosity. "My husband's family," Sarah answered, the words bitter on her tongue. "They didn't want... They thought..." She couldn't finish, tears making dusty tracks down her cheeks. Chetan nodded, as if this explained everything. "White men do this," he said simply. "Leave what they think has no value." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her condition, the meager supplies, the broken wagon. Then he stood and walked to his horse, returning with a water skin. He offered it to her without a word. Sarah hesitated only briefly before accepting. The water was cool and sweet on her parched lips. She wanted to gulp it down, but forced herself to drink slowly, knowing too much would make her sick. "Thank you," she said, offering the skin back. Chetan shook his head. "Keep," he said. Then, after a pause, "Night comes. Cold soon. You cannot. Stay." Fear gripped her heart. "I can't travel. The birth, I know." He glanced at the blood-soaked ground. "You bleed too much. But this is not safe place." He gestured to the surrounding desert. "Coyotes come. Maybe men who left you return." Sarah knew he was right. Already the temperature was dropping, the desert surrendering its heat to the night. Sky with alarming speed. The twins would not survive the cold, and she was too weak to maintain a fire through the night. "What choice do I have?" she asked, defeat heavy in her voice. Chetan considered her question seriously. "I take you to my people," he said finally. "Medicine woman there, she help." "Your people." Sarah's fear returned. "They won't want me." "Some will not," he agreed with surprising candor. "But a pony, the medicine woman, she takes in what others. Oh, cast away. She will help." "Why?" Sarah asked, the question barely audible. "Why would you help me?" Chetan was silent for a moment, his gaze moving from her face to the twin boys and back again. "Many moons ago, white soldiers killed my wife," he said finally. "She carried our child." His expression remained stoic, but something flickered in his eyes, an old pain, carefully contained. "No one helped her. I could not reach her in time." He straightened, decision made. I will not leave another to die when I can help. It is not our way. Sarah felt tears threatening again, this time from a gratitude so profound it had no words. She had been prepared to die in this barren place, her only hope that someone might find her sons before it was too late. Now this man, this stranger, whose people had every reason to hate hers, was offering salvation. How? She asked, looking at her weakened state, the newborn twins, the vast distance that surely lay between them and safety. Chetan moved with efficient purpose, gathering her blankets and the few supplies worth salvaging from the wagon. He fashioned a carrier from his own blanket, a cleverly designed sling that would hold both infants securely against his chest. "You ride," he explained, indicating his horse. "I walk. Baby's here." He patted the sling. "But—" Sarah began to protest. "You too weak to hold them," he said matter-of-factly. "You fall, they die. Better this way." There was no arguing with his logic. With his help, Sarah managed to stand, swaying with weakness. The world spun alarmingly, and she would have fallen if Chetan's strong hand hadn't caught her elbow. "Blood loss makes head light," he observed. "Must go slow." Getting her onto the horse was a painful ordeal that left Sarah gasping and close to fainting. The twins were transferred to the sling, where they nestled against Chetan's chest, surprisingly quiet in their new position. As they prepared to leave, Sarah looked back at the wagon, the last tangible connection to her life with Thomas. There was nothing worth saving, nothing worth remembering except the bitterness of betrayal. "My husband wasn't like his father," she said suddenly, needing this stranger to understand. "He wouldn't have done this." Chetan paused, considering her. "Words, perhaps," he said finally, "but he left you among wolves." With that, he began walking, leading the horse at a careful pace across the darkening desert. Sarah clung to the saddle, fighting to stay conscious as they traveled. She watched Chetan's back, straight and strong despite the burden he carried. Occasionally he would murmur to the twins in his native tongue, soft words that seemed to soothe them when they grew restless. They walked for what seemed like hours, the moon rising to light their path across the Badlands. Sarah drifted in and out of awareness, her thoughts fragmented by pain and exhaustion. Once she thought she heard singing, a low, rhythmic chant that seemed to blend with the night sounds around them. "What is that song?" she asked, her voice thin in the vastness. Chetan glanced back at her. "Prayer for safe journey," he replied. "For you, for small ones." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if he heard. The land began to change subtly, the barren desert giving way to scattered vegetation, scrub brush, hardy grasses, the occasional cluster of trees marking the presence of water. Sarah's mind registered the transition dimly, hope flickering like a distant flame. They crested a low rise, and below them, nestled in a protected valley, Sarah saw the glow of fires. Tepees stood in a rough circle, their conical shapes solid and reassuring against the night sky. Dogs barked in the distance, announcing their approach. "My people," Chetan said, pausing to let her take in the sight. "A pony's lodge is there." He pointed to a teepee, set slightly apart from the others, marked with symbols Sarah didn't recognize. As they approached the encampment, figures emerged from the teepees, alerted by the dogs. Sarah felt the weight of unseen eyes, the murmur of voices speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Fear clutched at her again. What if they turned her away? What if they saw only an enemy in her pale skin and blue eyes? But Chetan continued. Forward, his pace unhurried, his bearing dignified. He called out in his native tongue, a brief explanation that caused the onlookers to fall back, making way for their passage. Before the medicine woman's lodge, Chetan finally stopped. He spoke quietly to someone just inside the entrance, and moments later, an elderly woman emerged. Her face was deeply lined, her hair white as snow, but she moved with the surety of someone half her age. She took in the scene with sharp, intelligent eyes, Chetan with the twins in their sling, Sarah swaying atop the horse. "Bring her inside," the old woman said in perfect English, startling Sarah. "Quickly now." Hands reached up to help Sarah dismount, and the world tilted dangerously as her feet touched the ground. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was Chetan carefully unwrapping the twins from their sling, his large hands impossibly gentle against their tiny forms. "They're beautiful," the old woman, a pony, was saying. "Strong spirits in such small bodies." Then darkness claimed her, and Sarah knew nothing more. Sarah awoke to unfamiliar sounds, the soft crackle of a small fire, the distant laughter of children, the rhythmic scrape of something being ground in a mortar. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. This was not the Reynolds Ranch, nor her family's home in Pennsylvania. Certainly not the broken wagon in the Badlands. The air smelled of smoke, herbs, and something earthy she couldn't identify. She lay on a bed of soft furs, a woven blanket of intricate geometric patterns draped over her. The walls around her were hide, stretched over wooden poles that met at a central point high above, where daylight filtered through an opening with a smoke flap. A teepee. She was in a Sioux lodge. Memory rushed back like a flash flood. The birth, the blood, the twins. "My babies," she gasped, trying to sit up. Pain lanced through her abdomen, forcing her back down with a moan. "Be still," came a voice from nearby. "Your sons are safe." The elderly woman Sarah recalled from the night before moved into her line of sight. A pony, the medicine woman. Up close, her face was a map of deep lines, each one etched by time and experience. Her dark eyes, however, were clear and sharp, missing. "Nothing? You nearly died," a pony continued matter-of-factly, kneeling beside Sarah with a small clay cup. "Drink this. It will help with the pain and stop more bleeding." The liquid was bitter, with an aftertaste like willow bark. Sarah grimaced but drank it all, too desperate for relief to refuse. "My sons," she repeated, her voice steadier now. "Here." A pony moved aside, revealing a small cradle board near the fire. Sarah could see 2 tiny bundles, swaddled tightly in soft rabbit fur. "They are strong, like their mother." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "You saved us. Chetan brought you. I merely used what knowledge the spirits have given me." A pony settled beside the fire, adding herbs to a pot of simmering water. "You were fortunate. Another hour and you would have bled into the earth, leaving these little ones alone in a hard world." "Where is he?" "Chetan," Sarah asked, suddenly aware of his absence. "Speaking with the council. Not all are pleased he brought a white woman to our camp." A pony's hands continued their work, nimble despite their age. "These are difficult times for our people. The white man's government makes promises with one hand and takes with the other. Some fear you may bring soldiers to our door." Fear clutched at Sarah's heart. "I won't. I have nowhere else to go. My husband's family left me to die." A pony nodded, unsurprised. "So Chetan said. It is not the first such story I have heard." She regarded Sarah with a measuring gaze. "What will you do when you are healed?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She had been so focused on surviving the immediate crisis that she hadn't thought beyond it. Where could she go? She had no money, no family within 1,000 miles. Going back to the Reynolds Ranch was unthinkable, and even if she could somehow make it to a town, what then? A widow with twin newborns would find little welcome or opportunity. "I don't know," she admitted finally. A pony seemed to accept this. "For now, you rest and regain your strength. Tomorrow is soon enough to think of tomorrow." A soft cry rose from one of the bundled infants. A pony moved to the cradle board, lifting the child with practiced ease. "This one, the second born, he has hunger," She brought the baby to Sarah, who awkwardly tried to position herself to nurse. A pony helped, adjusting pillows and showing her how to hold the infant. "You have not done this before," the old woman observed. Sarah shook her head. "I helped with calving and foaling on my father's farm, but this—" She looked down at her son's tiny face, still red and wrinkled from birth. "This is different. All new life requires guidance." A pony's voice softened. "The buffalo cow does not question how to care for her calf. Neither should you question your body's wisdom." As if to prove her point, James latched successfully, his tiny hands kneading reflexively. Sarah felt a rush of emotion so powerful it took her breath away. Love and fear intertwined, responsibility heavier than any burden she had ever carried. "What did you call him?" a pony asked. "James," Sarah replied, "and his brother is Henry." A pony made a soft sound, neither approval nor disapproval. "They will need names with power to protect them in this land, names that speak to their spirits." She returned to her work by the fire, but that can wait. For now, they are simply the sons of a brave mother. The flap of the teepee opened, admitting a shaft of bright sunlight. A young woman entered, her arms filled with dried meat and berries. She stopped short at the sight of Sarah awake and nursing, her expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness. A pony spoke to her in Lakota, gesturing toward Sarah. The young woman nodded, carefully placing her burden near the fire before approaching. "This is Kimimela, my granddaughter," a pony explained. "She will help care for you and the little ones." Kimimela appeared to be in her late teens, with a quiet dignity that reminded Sarah of Chetan. She wore a deerskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork and kept her eyes respectfully lowered as a pony introduced her. "Thank you," Sarah said to her directly, "for your help." The girl glanced up, startled to be addressed, then offered a tentative smile before speaking in halting English. "I help babies." James had fallen asleep at Sarah's breast. A pony showed her how to switch to Henry, who nursed with even greater vigor than his brother. Outside, the sounds of the camp continued, dogs barking, children playing, women calling to one another. Normal life continuing just beyond the teepee walls, while inside, Sarah struggled to adjust to her new reality. "How long have I been here?" she asked. "2 nights and a day," a pony replied. "The fever came and went. That is good. It means your blood is strong." 2 days. Sarah tried to process this. 2 days since her world had fallen apart and reformed into something unrecognizable. 2 days since strangers had shown her more kindness than her husband's family ever had. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah drifted in and out of sleep, the medicine and her body's exhaustion pulling her under, despite her desire to remain alert. Each time she woke, either a pony or Kimimela was there, tending the fire, checking on the twins, bringing water. The normalcy of their movements was oddly comforting. It was near dusk when the teepee flap opened again and Chetan entered. He looked tired, the lines around his mouth deeper than Sarah remembered, but he carried himself with the same quiet dignity. He spoke briefly with a pony, his voice low, before turning his attention to Sarah. "You are awake," he said. "This is good." "Because of you," Sarah replied. "You saved us." He made a dismissive gesture. "I only found you. A pony did the rest." "The council?" a pony asked him in English, for Sarah's benefit. Chetan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "They will allow her to stay until she is well enough to travel. After that—" He trailed off, leaving the council's decision unspoken. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with her physical condition. "They want me to leave?" "Some do," he acknowledged. "Others understand you are no threat, but these are not peaceful times between our peoples." He looked at her directly. "Every day more settlers come. Every day our hunting grounds shrink. Every day there are new stories of broken promises. I'm not one of them, Sarah protested weakly. I have no one. I know this. But fear does not always listen to reason. He glanced at the twins, his expression softening slightly. For now you are safe. We will think about tomorrow when it comes. A pony echoed his words from earlier, and Sarah wondered if this was a common saying among these people. She tried to imagine living moment to moment, not weighed down by fears of the future or regrets of the past. It seemed both liberating and terrifying. There is something else, Chetan said after a pause. Riders were seen today, near where I found you. White men searching the desert. Sarah's blood ran cold. Reynolds' men. Perhaps. 3 riders, well armed. They found the wagon. Looking to make sure I'm dead, Sarah whispered, clutching Henry closer. Or looking to finish what they started, Chetan said bluntly. If they find tracks leading here, they won't come at night, a pony interjected, and tomorrow Running Elk and the others will make sure any trail disappears. Chetan nodded, apparently satisfied with this plan. Rest now, he told Sarah. Gain strength. You will need it. After he left, Sarah found it impossible to recapture the peace she had felt earlier. The idea that Jeremiah's men might be searching for her might threaten not only her and the twins, but also the people who had saved them, filled her with dread. Why would they come looking? She asked a pony, who was preparing a tea over the fire. They left me to die. Why not just let the desert do their work for them? A pony regarded her thoughtfully. Perhaps they fear you might survive. Perhaps they worry what you know. She handed Sarah a cup of the fragrant brew. Or perhaps they have second thoughts about the children. Men like this, men who command others with money and fear. They do not like loose ends. Sarah thought of Jeremiah Reynolds, of the cold calculation in his eyes when he spoke of his legacy, of his obsession with having an heir to carry on his name and inherit his vast holdings. She had assumed he didn't want twins because they would divide the inheritance or because he feared they might be girls. But what if she had misunderstood his intentions? The boys, she said slowly, realization dawning. He might want the boys. A pony nodded, understanding immediately. The bloodline, yes. Such men care about these things beyond reason. But he sent me away, Sarah protested. He wanted me gone. You, a pony emphasized, not necessarily them. Perhaps he thought to claim them later, to raise them as his own, without the complication of their mother. The idea was so monstrous that Sarah could barely comprehend it, yet it made a terrible kind of sense. Jeremiah had lost his eldest sons. Thomas had been his last hope for continuing the Reynolds dynasty. The twins, Thomas's sons, would be valuable to him, especially if he could control their upbringing, shape them into the heirs he had always wanted. I won't let him take them, Sarah said, her voice low and fierce. I'd die first. That, a pony said grimly, may be what he's counting on. That night, Sarah slept fitfully, waking at every sound, imagining riders approaching in the darkness. The twins, however, seemed oblivious to her fear, sleeping peacefully in their cradle board, waking only to nurse before drifting off again. In the grey light before dawn, Kimimela arrived to help with their care, her gentle hands changing wrappings and bathing the infants with sure movements. Outside, the camp was stirring earlier than usual. Sarah could hear men's voices, horses being readied. She caught fragments of Kimimela's translation as the girl listened to the activity. They go, make false trails, she explained haltingly. Lead bad men away. Sarah nodded her understanding. Thank you, she said, not for the first time. For everything. Kimimela gave her that same shy smile. You sleep now. I watch babies. Despite her anxiety, exhaustion pulled Sarah under again. When she next awoke, the teepee was filled with golden afternoon light. A different young woman was tending the fire, one Sarah hadn't seen before. She looked up when Sarah stirred, her expression openly curious. Kimimela went to help with washing, she explained in surprisingly good English. I am Wachiwi, bird. I'm Sarah, she replied, struggling to sit up. Her body felt marginally stronger today, the pain in her abdomen duller, more manageable. I know who you are, Wachiwi said. Everyone knows. The white woman Chetan brought from the desert. There was neither hostility nor particular warmth in her tone, just simple acknowledgement of fact. Sarah wasn't sure how to respond to this. Are the children all right? Wachiwi nodded toward the cradleboard. They sleep. A pony says they are strong, like eagle chicks. Sarah felt a surge of maternal pride, followed immediately by concern. Have the men returned? The ones who went to make false trails? Yes. They rode many circles, left marks pointing south away from our camp. If the white men follow, they will find themselves near Apache territory. Wachiwi's mouth curved in a small, satisfied smile. They do not go there, if they are wise. This should have been reassuring, but Sarah couldn't shake her sense of foreboding. What if they don't follow the false trail? What if they keep searching? Wachiwi shrugged. Then our warriors will deal with them. She said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. The twins began to stir, making small mewling sounds that signaled hunger. Wachiwi helped Sarah position them for nursing, showing no discomfort at the intimate task. As they fed, she studied them with open curiosity. They do not look the same, she observed. Sarah looked down at her sons. It was true. Though both had the same delicate features of newborns, Henry was slightly larger, with a tuft of dark hair that promised to be as black as his father's. James was smaller, more delicate, with hair so fine and light it was nearly invisible. Twins often don't, Sarah explained, even though they're born together. Wachiwi nodded thoughtfully. We had twins in our band once, boys. One lived, one died before the naming ceremony. She made a small gesture, possibly warding off bad luck. It is rare among our people. Is it considered unlucky? Sarah asked hesitantly. Some think so, Wachiwi admitted. But a pony says twins have special medicine, 1 foot in this world, one in the spirit world. They see things others cannot. The idea was both strange and oddly comforting. Sarah looked at her sons with new eyes, wondering what futures awaited them in this harsh, beautiful land. A pony says you have nowhere to go, Wachiwi continued, that your husband's people abandoned you. Yes. Sarah saw no point in hiding what the entire camp likely already knew, and now the white men search for you. For the children, I think, Sarah corrected. My father-in-law, he wants an heir. He may have decided the twins could serve his purpose without me in the way. Wachiwi's expression darkened. Men who think children are possessions, she said with unexpected vehemence. They are the same in any tribe. Something in her tone suggested personal experience, but Sarah knew better than to pry. Instead, she changed the subject. How did you learn to speak English so well? A shadow crossed Wachiwi's face. The missionary school, 3 winters. She touched a small cross that hung at her throat, half hidden by her dress. They taught reading, writing, their God's words, also how to be ashamed of our ways. You escaped? Sarah guessed. My father traded many horses to bring me home, Wachiwi corrected. He saw what the school was doing, not teaching, but erasing. Her fingers closed around the cross. Some things are useful to keep, others I try to forget. The conversation was interrupted by a pony's return. The old woman carried bundles of fresh herbs and what looked like strips of dried meat. She spoke to Wachiwi in Lakota, and the young woman nodded, making space by the fire. The men who went. To make false trails, saw something else, Aponi told Sarah as she arranged her bundles. More riders coming from the east. Soldiers. Sarah's breath caught. Are they looking for me too? No. Aponi's face was grim. They are looking for us. There is a new treaty, new borders for our hunting grounds. They come to tell us we must move again. But this is your home, Sarah protested. Aponi gave her a look that contained centuries of patience in the face of injustice. Home is where the people are, she said simply. The land remembers us even when we cannot stay, she began. Grinding herbs with practiced movements, the pestle striking the mortar in a steady rhythm. The council meets now to decide what to do. Some say fight. Others say move before the soldiers reach us. There will be no agreement quickly. And me? The children? Sarah asked, suddenly afraid that in the face of this larger threat, their presence would become an intolerable burden. That too they discuss, Aponi acknowledged, but Chetan speaks for you. He has standing among the warriors. They listen. Outside, the camp's activity had taken on a more urgent quality. Women could be heard packing belongings, men checking weapons. The peace of the morning had evaporated like dew under the harsh sun. If the soldiers come, Sarah said slowly, and find me here. Yes, Aponi confirmed her unspoken thought. It would go badly for everyone. The weight of this realization settled over Sarah like a stone. She had brought danger to these people who had saved her life, who were continuing to protect her despite the risk. Their kindness might cost them dearly. I should leave, she said, though the thought of facing the wilderness again with newborns filled her with terror. As soon as I can travel. Aponi regarded her steadily. And go where, Sarah Reynolds? Back to the people who left you to die? To a town where a woman alone with 2 infants would find only charity laced with judgment? Or into the wilderness to face the elements again? Put that way, every option seemed impossible. Sarah felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. I don't know, she admitted, but I can't let your people suffer because of me. Our people have suffered long before you came, Aponi said, her voice gentle despite the hard truth of her words. And will continue to suffer long after you go. This is not your burden to carry. The teepee flap opened, admitting Chetan. He looked even more tired than before, his face drawn with the weight of whatever had been discussed in the council. He spoke rapidly to Aponi in Lakota, the words flowing too quickly for Sarah to catch any of the few phrases she had begun to recognize. Aponi listened, nodding occasionally, her face betraying nothing of her thoughts. When Chetan finished, she responded briefly, gesturing once towards Sarah and the twins. Finally, Chetan turned to address Sarah directly. The council has decided, he said. We break camp tomorrow at dawn, moving deeper into the hills where the soldiers will not easily follow. Sarah nodded, steeling herself for the inevitable next words, that she and the twins would not be joining them, that they would be left behind or directed to the nearest settlement. Instead, Chetan continued, You will come with us. She stared at him in disbelief. The council agreed to this? Not all, he admitted, but enough. You are still healing. The little ones are too young for the trail alone. He paused, then added quietly, And I gave my word that I would see you safe. Sarah didn't know what to say. The depth of this commitment from a man who owed her nothing left her speechless. There is a condition, he continued. When we reach the summer hunting grounds, when you are stronger, you must decide your path, to stay or to go. And if you choose to go, you must never speak of where you have been, who you have seen. I would never betray your trust, Sarah promised. Chetan nodded, accepting her word without question. Then rest tonight. Tomorrow will be a hard journey. After he left, Sarah looked at Aponi, still trying to process what had just happened. Why would he do this, risk so much for strangers? Aponi continued her work with the herbs, but her eyes were distant, seeing something beyond the walls of the teepee. "My grandson carries many wounds that do not show," she said finally. "When the soldiers killed his wife, they killed something in him too. For many moons, he moved like a man already dead, going through the motions of living without being truly alive." She looked at Sarah directly. "Finding you and these little ones, perhaps the spirits sent you to heal him as much as he saved you." Sarah considered this perspective, so different from anything she had been raised to believe. The idea that their meeting might have been destined, orchestrated by forces beyond human understanding, was both foreign and strangely compelling. "What if I'm bringing him? Bringing all of you? Only more pain?" she asked. Aponi's weathered face softened into something approaching a smile. "Life brings pain, child. To avoid it is to avoid living. The question is not whether pain will come, but what we do with it when it arrives." She glanced meaningfully at the twins. "These little ones, they may grow up between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. That is a difficult path, but it may also be one of great vision, great understanding." Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah could hear the camp preparing for the journey ahead, a journey she would now be part of, for better or worse. "Tomorrow," Aponi said, rising to check on the twins, "we go to meet whatever waits for us. Tonight we pray it is something better than what we leave behind." Dawn broke with the sound of a camp dismantling itself, the efficient movements of a people who had perfected the art of mobility. Sarah sat outside Aponi's teepee, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, watching as the Sioux women rolled hides, packed cooking utensils, and secured belongings to travois. She felt useless, still too weak to help, yet acutely aware that her presence had contributed to this rushed departure. The twins slept against her chest, bundled together in a sling Kimimela had fashioned, their tiny breaths sinking in slumber. Henry's shock of dark hair had dried into wild tufts, while James remained nearly bald, his skin more translucent than his brother's. 1 week old, and already they had survived more than many did in a lifetime. "You should not sit on the ground," Aponi scolded, emerging from the half-dismantled teepee. "The bleeding may start again," Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "I couldn't stay inside another moment, not when everyone is working so hard." Aponi made a dismissive sound. "You work by healing, by keeping those little ones alive." She handed Sarah a strip of dried meat. "Eat. The journey will be long." Chetan appeared, leading 3 horses, and bore a modified travois, smaller than the others, with a cradle-like structure built into it. "For you and the little ones," he explained, noting Sarah's questioning look. "You cannot ride properly yet." The contraption looked precarious, but Sarah was in no position to object. Any means of transport was better than being left behind. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate for everything he had done. "I don't know how I'll ever repay—" "There is no debt between us," he interrupted, his expression softening slightly. "The Creator put you in my path." I followed his will. Before she could respond, a commotion rose from the eastern edge of camp. A young warrior rode in hard, his horse lathered with exertion. He called out in Lakota, his voice urgent. Chetan's posture changed instantly, tension visible in every line of his body. He barked orders to nearby men, who immediately moved toward their weapons. "What is it?" Sarah asked, clutching the twins tighter. "Soldiers," Aponi answered grimly. "Close. They must have ridden through the night." Panic flared in Sarah's chest. "Because of me?" "No," Chetan said, returning to her side. "This was already in motion before you came, but it changes our plans." He glanced at the half-packed camp. "We must split up. Small groups move faster, leave less trace. The old ones and mothers with young children will go north into the high hills," Aponi explained. "Warriors and hunters will circle east to Draw the soldiers away. And me, Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. You come with us, Aponi confirmed, with the women and children. Within minutes, the camp had transformed from ordered activity to controlled chaos. Tepes came down with remarkable speed, their components separated into manageable loads. Children, who had been playing, were gathered up, their games forgotten as they sensed the adults' urgency. Chetan helped Sarah onto the travois, arranging blankets to cushion her still tender body. The twins were secured in the cradle structure, swaddled so tightly they resembled tiny cocoons. I will find you at the sacred waters, Chetan told Aponi, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. 5 days, if all goes well. The old woman nodded, accepting what clearly was a familiar separation. May your path be clear, and your eye true, grandson. He turned to Sarah. Trust Aponi. Do exactly as she says. His eyes lingered on the twins for a moment. Keep them quiet if you can. I will, Sarah promised. Be careful. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Always. Then he was gone, mounting his horse and riding toward a group of warriors gathering at the camp's edge. The women's party moved out first, a procession of about 20 travelers, elderly men, women with young children, a few adolescent girls. Including Kimimela and Wachiwi, they headed north, keeping to a rocky path that would leave minimal tracks. 4 young warriors rode with them, positioned at the front, rear and flanks of the group. Sarah's travois swayed with the horse's movement, a rocking motion that would have been soothing under different circumstances. As it was, each jolt sent pain through her healing body, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. They travelled in near silence, the only sounds the creak of leather, the clop of hooves on stone, and the occasional whisper between travellers. Even the children seemed to understand the need for quiet, their usual exuberance dampened by the tension surrounding them. By midday, they had climbed high enough that Sarah could look back and see the vast expanse of land they had crossed. The camp was gone, erased as thoroughly as if it had never existed. In the far distance, a dust cloud moved east. The warriors, she realized, deliberately drawing attention. There, Wachiwi murmured, riding up beside the travois. She pointed southeast. Soldiers. Sarah squinted against the sun's glare. Tiny figures on horseback moved in formation across the desert floor, their blue uniforms barely distinguishable at this distance. They were following the warrior's trail, just as Chetan had intended. Will they be safe? She asked, thinking of. Chetan Wachiwi's expression was unreadable. They know these hills better than any bluecoat. They will lead them in circles until they are too tired and thirsty to continue. Her tone suggested this was a game the Sioux had played before. They continued north, the terrain growing more difficult as they ascended. Pine forests replaced scrubland, the air cooler and fragrant with resin. Sarah had never been this high, in the mountains, had never seen the land from a bird's perspective. Despite their dire circumstances, she couldn't help but be moved by the wild beauty surrounding them. The twins woke hungry, their cries piercing the quiet of the forest. Sarah nursed them awkwardly as the travois continued to move, Kimimela riding. Close to ensure they didn't fall. The girl's gentle presence was a comfort, her calm voice soothing as she taught Sarah Lakota words for common objects. Changte, she said, touching her chest. Heart. Changte, Sarah repeated, the unfamiliar sounds clumsy on her tongue. Kimimela smiled encouragingly. Good. Now, Wichinchala. She pointed to the twins. Wichinchala, Sarah echoed. It means babies. Boys, Kimimela corrected. Girl is Wichinchala Wing. Sarah found herself oddly moved by this simple exchange, the careful sharing of language, of identity. She had been taught that Indians were savages, dangerous obstacles to civilization. Yet here she was, dependent on their kindness, learning their words, surrounded by a people who had every reason to hate her, but had chosen compassion instead. "My people," she said hesitantly, unsure how to express what she wanted to say. "They tell stories about yours. Bad stories." Kimimela nodded, unsurprised. "We also have stories of white men who speak with forked tongues, who make promises in writing, then break them." She glanced at the twins. "But stories are not always true for everyone. Your little ones will learn better ones." As evening approached, they made camp in a sheltered ravine where a small stream provided fresh water. No fires were lit, too risky with soldiers in the area. Instead, they ate dried meat and berries, huddling together for warmth as the mountain air grew chill. Sarah found herself placed between Aponi and Wachiwi. The twins nestled securely between them. The stars emerged, brilliant in the clear mountain air, more numerous than she had ever seen. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked Aponi, as the camp settled for the night. "To the summer hunting grounds," the old woman replied, "near the sacred waters where our people have gathered for many generations. And the soldiers won't find us there?" Aponi's smile was grim. "They might, but it is harder to attack what you cannot see. The hunting grounds have many hiding places, caves where we can shelter if needed." Sarah thought about this. The constant movement, the need to hide, all to preserve a way of life that seemed to be vanishing like morning mist. "How long can you keep running?" she asked softly. "Until we can run no more," Aponi answered simply. "Or until there is nowhere left to run." That night Sarah dreamed of her father's farm in Pennsylvania, the green rolling hills, the sturdy barn with its hayloft where she used to hide with books, the apple orchard that bloomed white in spring. In the dream, she walked the familiar paths with her twins, now grown into young boys, with Chatan's straight black hair and her own blue eyes. They ran ahead of her, laughing, belonging to the land in a way she never fully had. She woke with tears on her cheeks, a deep ache in her chest that had nothing to do with her physical wounds. The second day of travel brought steeper climbs and denser forest. The twins were fussier, perhaps sensing their mother's discomfort or simply responding to the strange surroundings. Sarah sang to them softly, old lullabies from her childhood, earning curious glances from the Sioux children who rode nearby. Near midday, one of the warrior scouts returned with news that had the leaders of their party conferring in urgent tones. Sarah couldn't understand the rapid Lakota, but the tension was unmistakable. "White men," Wachiwi translated for her, voice low. "Not soldiers. 3 riders following our trail." Ice spread through Sarah's veins. "Reynolds' men?" "We don't know. But they are armed and tracking deliberately." Wachiwi's hand moved to the knife at her belt. "We change direction now. Move faster." Their pace increased. The horses pushed harder over difficult terrain. They veered northwest, taking paths so narrow and rocky that Sarah feared the travois would tip over the edge. The twins sensed the change, becoming increasingly agitated until their cries echoed off the canyon walls. "They must be quiet," Aponi warned, her usual calm demeanor strained. "Sound carries far in these hills." Sarah tried everything, nursing, rocking, singing, but the twins, perhaps overtired from the jostling journey, refused to settle. Finally, Aponi produced a small pouch from her medicine bag, a very small amount, she instructed, showing Sarah how to wet her finger, dip it in the powder, and let each baby suck it briefly. "It will not harm them, just make them sleep." Sarah hesitated, maternal instinct warring with their desperate situation, but the distant sound of hoofbeats echoing up the canyon decided for her. She administered the medicine as directed, and within minutes, both boys were deeply asleep. They continued their flight through the afternoon, taking increasingly difficult paths that no casual traveler would attempt. By evening, they had reached A high plateau ringed with pine trees, offering some protection from prying eyes, while providing clear sight lines in all directions. "We rest here," a pony announced. "The horses cannot go further without water and rest." Camp was established with minimal fuss. No teepees, just blankets arranged beneath the trees. The twins slept on, unnaturally still, causing Sarah to check their breathing repeatedly until a pony assured her the medicine was wearing off naturally. As night fell, 2 of their warrior escorts took up positions on either end of the plateau, watching for pursuit. Sarah found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, the knowledge that men were hunting them, hunting her children, keeping her alert to every sound in the darkness. Wachiwi settled beside her, wrapped in a blanket against the mountain. "Chill. You should sleep," she said. "The little ones will wake hungry soon." "I can't," Sarah admitted, not knowing they're out there. Wachiwi nodded in understanding. "Men like that, men who hunt women and children, they exist in every tribe." She stared into the darkness. "My husband was such a man." Sarah turned to her in surprise. Wachiwi had never mentioned a husband before. He was a warrior, respected, for his bravery in battle. Wachiwi continued, her voice detached, as if telling someone else's story. "But in our lodge, he was cruel. His hands left marks no one saw." She touched her side, where old injuries might be hidden. "When I lost our child, he said I was cursed. He took another wife, a girl barely old enough to bleed." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. Wachiwi's smile was bitter. "I was fortunate. Many women are not. My father took me back against custom, brought me home." She glanced at Sarah. "That is why I understand your fear. Some men see women and children as possessions, to be claimed, not people to be cherished." The parallels between their experiences, spanning such different worlds, struck Sarah forcefully. "What happened to him? Your husband?" "He died raiding a crow camp 2 winters ago." Wachiwi's tone held no grief, no satisfaction, just simple acknowledgement of fact. "I mourned as custom required, but in my heart—" She trailed off. "In your heart, you were free," Sarah finished for her. Wachiwi nodded. "As you will be, if we can keep you from these men who hunt you." The conversation was interrupted by a soft signal from one of the watchmen. Everyone froze, listening intently. Sarah strained her ears, but heard nothing beyond the whisper of wind through pine needles. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the distant whinny of a horse, somewhere below them on the mountain path. "They followed," Wachiwi breathed, already reaching for her knife. A pony appeared beside them, moving with surprising stealth for her age. "Wake the others," she instructed Wachiwi. "Quietly, we must move now." "In darkness?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "The mountain paths were treacherous enough in daylight. We have no choice." A pony began gathering her medicines. "There is a cave system half a day's journey from here. We can hide there until the warriors find us." The camp dissolved into silent activity, possessions gathered, horses prepared. The twins, rousing from their induced sleep, began to fuss. Sarah tried to nurse them quickly, aware that every moment increased the danger of discovery. One of the scouts returned, reporting in hushed Lakota. Sarah caught the repeated word, Washichu, white men, and something about their location. "They make camp below," Wachiwi translated. "3 men, as we thought. They will resume tracking at first light." "Then we have a few hours' advantage," a pony said. "We must use it well." They set off under a moonless sky, guided only by starlight and the intimate knowledge of the mountains passed down through generations. Sarah clung to the travois, the twins secured tightly against her, every muscle in her body tense with fear of a misstep that would send them plunging off the narrow trail. The horses moved with surprising confidence in the darkness, their instincts more reliable than human vision. They climbed steadily for what seemed like hours, until the air grew thin enough that Sarah found herself breathing harder, her lungs burning with the effort. Just before dawn, they reached a natural overlook. In the grey pre-dawn light, Sarah could see the vast expanse they had travelled. Mountains rolling into the distance like frozen waves, valleys filled with morning mist, and far below, barely visible, the glow of a campfire where their pursuers rested, unaware that their quarry was now far above them. "They will lose our trail soon," a pony predicted, satisfaction evident in her voice. "These high paths are known only to our people." As the sun breached the horizon, painting the landscape in gold and rose, Sarah felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. A week ago, she had been prepared to die alone in the desert. Now she was fleeing through mountains with people who had become unlikely allies, her newborn sons alive and secure against her heart. She had no idea what waited for them at the sacred waters, or what future could possibly be built from the shattered pieces of her old life. But watching the sun rise over this wild, beautiful land, Sarah felt something unexpected unfurling within her. Not just the will to survive, but the first tender shoots of hope. "We keep moving," a pony announced, already turning her horse toward the path ahead. "The sacred waters await, and beyond them, whatever the Creator has planned for us." Sarah adjusted the twins, now awake and surprisingly calm in the cool mountain air. "Whatever comes," she whispered to them, "we face it together." The small caravan continued northward, disappearing into the forest like shadows, retreating before the light. Behind them, far below, 3 riders searched increasingly cold trails, unaware that their quarry had slipped beyond their reach into the ancient sanctuary of the mountains. They reached the sacred waters on the 4th day, a hidden valley cradled between towering peaks where hot springs bubbled up from the earth's depths, sending plumes of steam into the crisp mountain air. Ancient pines surrounded the springs, their massive trunks testimony to centuries of silent witness. Moss-covered rocks lined the pools, worn smooth by generations of hands. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Steam rose in ghostly tendrils, creating an otherworldly mist that softened the harsh mountain landscape. The air smelled of minerals and pine, a heady combination that felt cleansing even to breathe. Their arrival was met with relief by those who had reached the valley before them, several families who had taken different routes to avoid detection. Children emerged from hide-covered shelters, women looked up from their work. Elderly men, who had been consulting together, broke off their discussion. All eyes turned to the newcomers, lingering on Sarah and her twins with undisguised curiosity and varying degrees of welcome. "They wonder if you brought trouble behind you," a pony explained as they dismounted near the largest spring. "It is a fair concern." Sarah's legs trembled as she stood for the first time in days, muscles weak from disuse and her recent birth. Kemimela steadied her with a supportive arm while Wachiwi took charge of the twins, handling them with practiced ease despite her own history of loss. "Did we?" Sarah asked quietly. "Bring trouble?" "No," a pony said with certainty. "The men following? You lost your trail where the rocks give no marks. Even if they find it again, they would be days behind us now." One of the elder men approached, his face deeply lined, years etched into his copper skin like the rings of an ancient tree. His hair, braided with strips of red cloth, hung white against his buckskin shirt. He carried himself with the dignity of someone who had earned respect through wisdom rather than demanded it through force. "This is Chief Running Bear," a pony introduced him. "My brother. He speaks some English." The chief's dark eyes studied Sarah intently, neither hostile nor particularly friendly. "A pony says you were left to die," he said finally, his English halting but clear. "Yes." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "My husband's father abandoned me in the desert because I gave birth to twins instead of a single heir." Running Bear nodded, slowly. White men's ways are strange to us. Children are blessing, not burden. He glanced at the twins, who were fussing quietly in Wachiwi's arms. Boys? Yes. Henry and James. The chief's mouth twitched slightly. They will need Lakota names while they are with us. Names with power. It wasn't a request, Sarah realized, but it wasn't spoken unkindly either. It was simply how things would be, an acknowledgement that her sons now existed in a world where Henry and James carried no meaning, no protection. I would be honored, she said, and meant it. Running Bear seemed satisfied with her response. He spoke to a pony in Lakota, a lengthy exchange that Sarah couldn't follow, though she caught her name and Chetan's mentioned several times. My brother says you may stay until you are strong enough to decide your path, a pony translated. He has questions, but they can wait until you have rested. Sarah was led to a small lodge set apart from the others near one of the smaller springs. Inside, furs and blankets had been arranged to form a comfortable sleeping area, and a small fire pit in the center provided warmth against the mountain chill. The spring water has healing properties, Kimmy Meller explained, helping Sarah settle onto the furs. Later, when you are rested, we will take you there. Left alone with her sons, Sarah finally allowed herself to fully absorb their situation. They had escaped immediate danger, but what future awaited them here, among people whose very way of life was under threat? How long before soldiers or settlers pushed even into this remote sanctuary? And what of her pursuers? Would Jeremiah Reynolds truly abandon the search for his grandchildren, his last connection to his dead son? The twins nursed and slept, oblivious to their mother's concerns. Sarah marveled at their resilience, their ability to thrive despite everything. Henry, the larger of the two, had developed a serious expression that reminded her of Thomas in his quieter moments. James remained more delicate, but his grip had strengthened, tiny fingers clutching her. Thumb with surprising force. Your father would have loved you both so much, she whispered to them as they slept, no matter what his father thought. She dozed fitfully, awakened by every unfamiliar sound, the call of mountain birds, the distant laughter of children, the soft footfalls of women moving about the camp. When Kimmy Meller returned with food, a rich stew of dried meat and wild roots, the sun was already low in the sky, casting long shadows across the valley. You should eat, then we go to the spring, the girl said. A pony says it will help with the healing. The thought of immersing her still tender body in hot water made Sarah hesitate, but the promise of being truly clean for the first time in days was too tempting to resist. After eating, she followed Kimmy Meller to a small, secluded pool, somewhat removed from the main springs. Women's pool, Kimmy Meller explained, for after childbirth, monthly bleeding, special healing. Steam rose from the surface of the water, which shimmered with an unusual opalescence. Sarah could smell the minerals, sulfur and something else, something earthy and primal. All clothes, Kimmy Meller instructed, already removing her own dress. Without self-consciousness, water must touch everywhere. Sarah hesitated only briefly before disrobing. Her body felt foreign to her, stomach still swollen from pregnancy, breasts heavy with milk, the tender areas between her legs still raw from birth. But Kimmy Meller showed no reaction to her appearance, treating it as the natural state of a new mother. The water enveloped Sarah like a warm embrace, almost too hot at first, then blissfully soothing. She gasped as the mineral-rich spring worked. Its way into muscles she hadn't realized were knotted with tension. Kimmy Meller showed her how to cup the water and let it flow over her shoulders, her breasts, the still healing tissues that had been torn by childbirth. This place is sacred to your people, Sarah observed, noting the reverent way Kimmy Meller approached the springs. The girl nodded. Many generations come here. Waters heal body, cleanse spirit. She touched the surface of the pool, creating ripples that caught the fading sunlight. We believe Creator's breath warms the water from below, reminder of life beneath all things. Sarah closed her eyes, letting herself sink deeper into the spring. The heat penetrated to her very core, carrying away days of fear and pain. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something approaching peace. "The twins," she said suddenly, opening her eyes. "Who's watching them?" "Wachui," Kimimela assured her. "She knows how to care for little ones." They stayed in the spring until the light began to fade, then dressed in clean clothes Kimimela had brought, a simple deerskin dress for Sarah, soft and supple against her skin. Her hair, washed with a mixture of special clay from the springs, hung loose down her back, already drying in the cool evening air. As they walked back to the lodge, Sarah noticed a commotion at the camp's edge. People gathering, voices raised. In welcome, her heart quickened. Could it be Chetan? Kimimela confirmed, breaking into a smile. The warriors return. They hurried toward the gathering. Through the crowd, Sarah caught glimpses of mounted men, their faces painted for war, feathers, and coup sticks adorning their horses. At their center rode Chetan, his expression grave despite the apparent success of their mission. When he saw Sarah, something flickered across his features. Relief, perhaps, or satisfaction at finding her and the twins safe. He dismounted in one fluid motion and made his way through the welcoming crowd. "You made it," he said simply when he reached her. "Thanks to a pony and the others," Sarah replied. "What about the soldiers?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "They are camped 50 miles east, exhausted and confused, believing we fled toward the buffalo grounds." Running Bear approached, and Chetan turned his attention to the chief, speaking rapidly in Lakota. The news, whatever it was, caused murmurs to spread through the gathered people. "What is it?" Sarah asked Kimimela. "Soldiers have paper, new treaty," the girl translated, her expression troubled. "Say this land now belongs to white settlers. We must go to reservation by next moon." Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Even here, in this remote sanctuary, the relentless expansion of her people threatened to extinguish the way of life that had saved her and her children. "What will you do?" she asked. Kimimela shrugged, a gesture that conveyed both resignation and determination. "What we always do, find new place, adapt, survive." That night, the camp gathered around a central fire for a council. Sarah sat at the edge with the twins, feeling simultaneously part of and separate from the proceedings. The discussion was entirely in Lakota, but she didn't need to understand the words to read the emotions on the faces around her: anger, defiance, fear, resolve. Chetan spoke at length, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Whatever he proposed caused heated debate, with some warriors nodding in agreement while others shook their heads vehemently. Running Bear listened to all sides, his weathered face revealing nothing of his own thoughts. Later, as the council broke up into smaller groups, Chetan found Sarah outside her lodge, the twins asleep in their makeshift cradle. "You look better," he observed, sitting beside her on a fallen log. "The springs have helped." "They have," she agreed. "Kimimela says they're sacred." "They are." He gazed toward the mist rising from the hot pools. "My people have come here for countless generations. Before horses, before guns, before white men crossed the great waters." "And now?" Sarah asked gently. His expression hardened. "Now they say this land belongs to others. That marks on paper matter more than centuries of history." He picked up a stick, drawing absent patterns in the dirt. "The council is divided. Some say fight, others say we cannot win against so many guns. What do you think?" Chetan was silent for a long moment. "I think there are different kinds of winning," he said finally. "Sometimes surviving is victory enough." Sarah thought of her own journey, the betrayal, the birth, the desperate flight through the desert. "I understand that now," she said quietly. He glanced at the sleeping twins. "The naming ceremony will be tomorrow. A pony has seen their spirits in her dreams. Will they be accepted here?" Sarah asked, voicing the fear that had lingered beneath all others. "Children of mixed blood." "They are children," Chetan said simply. "In our way, they belong to the mother's people until they are old enough to choose their path." He met her eyes directly. "The question is, what do you choose, Sarah Reynolds? Will you stay among us or seek your own people when you're able?" It was the question she had been avoiding since her rescue. The thought of returning to white society carried its own dangers. A widow with twin infants and no means of support would face limited options, none of them appealing. She might find work as a laundress or cook in some frontier town, but the stigma of her situation would follow her, and the spectre of Jeremiah Reynolds would always loom. Staying meant embracing a completely foreign way of life, one under constant threat of extinction. It meant raising her sons between worlds, belonging fully to neither. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'm grateful for the choice." Chetan nodded, accepting her honesty. "Sleep now. Tomorrow brings its own decisions." Dawn broke clear and cold, painting the mountain peaks with golden light that gradually descended into the valley. Sarah woke to find the camp already in motion, preparations underway for what was clearly an important ceremony. Wachiwi arrived at her lodge, arms filled with new buckskin clothing for the twins and a beaded dress for Sarah herself. "For naming ceremony," she explained, "you must look proper." The dress was beautiful, soft tanned deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork in geometric patterns of blue and white. It had clearly been made for someone else, someone shorter and wider than Sarah, but Wachiwi deftly adjusted it with sinew thread, her nimble fingers working quickly. "Whose was this?" Sarah asked as Wachiwi arranged her hair, weaving in strands. "Of sweet grass and small blue beads. My sister's," Wachiwi replied. "She walks in the spirit world now. She would be pleased it honors new life." The ceremony took place near the largest of the springs, where the entire band had gathered in a circle. The twins, bathed in the mineral waters and dressed in tiny buckskin shirts, were unusually quiet, as if sensing the solemnity of the occasion. A pony took Henry first, holding him up toward the morning sun. She spoke in Lakota, her voice strong, despite her years, calling upon spirits and ancestors that Sarah could not see but whose presence seemed to fill the sacred space. "Wanbli Gleshka," a pony pronounced finally, "spotted eagle, one who sees far, who rises above the storm." The gathered people repeated the name, accepting it into their collective memory. James was next, his smaller frame almost disappearing in Ebony's weathered hands. Again she spoke to the spirits, but this time her words were different, softer, more contemplative. Wichapi Hing, she named him, rising star. One who brings light in darkness, who guides the way home. As the names settled over her sons, Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. These were not just sounds, not just labels to distinguish one child from another. They were visions, prayers, hopes for who these boys might become. Running. Bear stepped forward, making a mark on each child's forehead with red ochre. "They are known to us now," he announced in English, for Sarah's benefit. "The people will protect them as our own." The ceremony transitioned into a feast, the first real celebration, since the band had arrived at the sacred waters. Despite the uncertain future, despite the treaty that threatened to displace them yet again, the people embraced this moment of joy, this affirmation of life continuing, despite all attempts to extinguish it. Sarah sat between a pony and Wachiwi, watching as the twins were passed from person to person, admired and blessed by each member of the band. Chetan remained somewhat apart, observing rather than participating directly, but she caught him watching the children with an expression that might almost have been tenderness. Later, as the celebration continued around the fire, he approached her. "The names are good," he said. "Strong names for the journey ahead." "What journey?" Sarah asked. "Have you decided what the band will do about the treaty?" Chetan looked toward the mountains that surrounded them, their peaks eternal against the changing sky. "We go further north," he said, "beyond the territories the white government claims. There are cousins there who will welcome us." "When?" 3 days. "Time enough for you to grow stronger." He studied her face. "You are welcome to come with us, you and the little ones, or I can take you to the nearest settlement, if that is what you choose." Sarah followed his gaze to the mountains, then back to the fire where her sons were being held by Kimimela, their new names already replacing the ones she had given them in the desert. In just over a week, her world had been destroyed and rebuilt, in a form she never could have imagined. "I need to think," she said finally. Chetan nodded, respect in his eyes. "Some decisions cannot be rushed." He touched her shoulder briefly before moving away, the gesture so light she might have imagined it. That night, as the camp settled into sleep, Sarah sat outside her lodge, the twins nestled against her chest. Above, stars crowded the sky, brilliant in the clear mountain air. She thought of Thomas, of the life they had planned together, now forever beyond reach. She thought of the Reynolds Ranch, of Jeremiah's cold calculation, and the men who had hunted her through the desert and mountains. Then she thought of a pony's wisdom, Kimimela's gentle lessons, Wachiwi's fierce protection, and Chetan's quiet strength. She thought of the naming ceremony, of the way these people had embraced her sons, despite having every reason to reject them. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger no matter which direction she chose. But as she gazed up at the star-filled sky, cradling the newly named unbreakable and Wichapi Hing, Sarah Reynolds realized that for the first time since Thomas's death, she was not afraid of tomorrow. Whatever came next, whether they journeyed north with the band or returned to the world of settlements and stagecoaches, they would face it together, carrying with them the strength they had found in the most unlikely of sanctuaries. A hidden valley of sacred waters where ancient wisdom still bubbled up from the earth's depths, offering healing to those wise enough to receive it. The decision came to Sarah not in a moment of clarity, but through a series of small revelations. It began the morning after the naming ceremony, as she watched Kimimela teach a group of children to weave reeds into small baskets. The girls' patience, the children's eager concentration, the simple beauty of knowledge passed from one generation to the next. It struck Sarah that this was a continuity rarely found in the restless, forward-rushing world of white settlements. Later, that day, she observed 2 elderly women preparing a deer hide, their weathered hands working in perfect unison, singing softly as they scraped and stretched the skin. When they noticed her watching, they beckoned her over, showing her their technique with gentle corrections and encouraging nods. No words were needed. The work itself was the language they shared. By evening, Sarah found herself sitting with Wachiwi near one of the smaller springs, learning to bead a pair of tiny moccasins for the twins. Her stitches were clumsy compared to Wachiwi's precise patterns, but the older woman simply guided her fingers without judgment or impatience. "In your world," Sarah asked as they worked, "what happens to women without husbands, without family?" Wachiwi considered the question, her needle never pausing. "They are part of the band," she said simply. "All contribute what they can, cooking, tanning hides, gathering medicines, caring for children. No one goes hungry if others have food." "And children without fathers?" "They have many fathers, uncles, grandfathers, mothers, cousins." Wachiwi: gave her a sidelong glance. "You worry for your sons?" Sarah nodded. "In my world they would be pitied. Orphans, half-orphans. It's a hard path. Here they would be unbreakable and unwind, sons of a strong mother, nephews of the people." Wachiwi tied off a thread. "Different path, not easy, but never alone." That night, as Sarah nursed the twins in her lodge, a pony joined, her bringing a tea brewed from herbs gathered near the springs. The old woman settled beside the small fire, her gaze distant as if seeing beyond the hide walls surrounding them. "You have been thinking," she observed, "about your path forward." "Yes," Sarah admitted. "So many questions, so few certain answers." A pony's smile was gentle. "That is the way of all important choices. If the path were clear, there would be no need to choose." "In your visions," Sarah began hesitantly, "when you saw my son's spirits, did you see anything of their future?" The old woman was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns in the air, as if reading invisible signs. "I saw 2 eagles flying above a great river," she said finally. "One flew toward the rising sun, one toward the setting sun, but their paths crossed many times. What does it mean that they will walk different paths but remain connected?" A pony's dark eyes found Sarah's. "And that whatever you choose now, they will someday make their own choices." Sarah looked down at her sons, already growing and changing daily. Henry, unbreakable, stared back with solemn eyes that seemed too knowing for his age. James, unwind, slept peacefully, one tiny hand curled against his brother's arm. "And what of Chetan?" she asked, the question emerging. Before she could reconsider it, "What does he truly think of our presence here?" Something flickered across a pony's weathered features, surprise perhaps, or confirmation of a suspicion. "My grandson walks his own difficult path," she said carefully. "Since losing his wife, he has kept his heart closed, focused only on protecting the people, honoring the old ways. He's been kind to us." "Yes." A pony studied her thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is why some of the young warriors whisper. They see him changing, showing interest in more than hunting and war councils." "I wouldn't want to cause trouble for him," Sarah said, a new worry forming. "If my presence makes things difficult—" A pony raised a hand, stopping her. "Trouble comes whether we invite it or not. The question is not whether storms will gather, but how we weather them." She rose, gathering her medicine pouch. "Sleep now. Morning brings its own wisdom." The next day dawned grey and cool, clouds gathering over the mountains in tightly wound formations that promised rain. The camp's activity increased as people prepared for the coming journey north, checking travois lashings, sorting possessions to determine what could be carried and what must be left behind, smoking meat for the trail ahead. Sarah found herself helping almost without conscious decision, her hands joining others in the communal work. When unbreakable fussed, a grandmother simply lifted him from the cradle board and soothed him, while Sarah continued packing dried berries into parfleche bags. When unwind needed nursing, a space was created near the fire where she could sit comfortably, sheltered from the increasingly sharp wind. Midday brought the first scattered raindrops, fat and cold against the skin. People moved their work inside lodges or under hastily erected shelters of pine boughs. Sarah was helping Kimimela secure a stack of hides when she noticed unusual activity at the camp's southern edge, warriors gathering, weapons in hand. "What's happening?" she asked, but Kimimela was already moving toward the commotion, her young face tense with concern. Sarah followed, the twins secure with Wachiwi in a nearby lodge. As she approached, she saw Chetan mounted on his war pony, giving rapid instructions to a group of warriors. Others were ushering women and children toward the caves that dotted the valley's northern ridge. "Riders coming," a young man told Kimimela. In Lakota, the urgency in his voice needing no translation. Sarah felt cold dread spreading through her chest. "Soldiers?" Kimimela shook her head after listening to more hurried explanations. "Not soldiers. 3 men. Same ones from before. The Reynolds men. They had found the trail after all." Chetan spotted Sarah and rode over, his expression grim. "You should be with the children in the caves," he said without preamble. "Are you certain it's them?" she asked. "The men who were tracking us?" "Yes. Our scouts recognized the horses." His eyes held hers steadily. "They are heavily armed and approaching quickly. They must have picked up our trail where it crosses the eastern ridge." Sarah's mind raced. These men had tracked her across desert and mountains, persisting where others would have abandoned the search. Whatever reward or punishment Jeremiah Reynolds had promised them must be significant. "Let me speak to them," she said suddenly. Chetan's brow furrowed. "Why would you face men who wish you harm? Because they're here for me, for the twins. Their quarrel isn't with your people." She looked around at the camp, at the women hurrying children to safety, at warriors preparing for a confrontation that could only end badly. "Enough blood has been shed over borders and belonging. I won't add to it. And if they try to take you by force, take the children." Sarah lifted her chin. "Then your warriors will stop them, and it will be the Reynolds men who caused the fight, not me." Chetan studied her face, something like respect kindling in his eyes. Finally, he nodded and turned to the warriors, issuing new orders in rapid Lakota. They responded immediately, half moving into concealed positions around the clearing where the confrontation would take place, the others withdrawing to form a protective line before the caves. "They will be hidden but ready," Chetan explained, dismounting to stand beside her. "If the white men show violence, they will not leave this valley. And if they don't, then you speak your words, and we see what comes of them." He handed her his knife, a gesture that startled her. "Keep this hidden in your dress. Use it if you must." The weight of the blade against her palm was both reassuring and terrifying. Sarah slipped it into a fold of her dress, hoping desperately she would not need to draw it. Rain began to fall more steadily as they waited in the clearing, forming a silvery curtain that reduced visibility and muffled sounds. Sarah pulled a blanket over her head for protection, conscious suddenly of her appearance. The Lakota dress, the beaded moccasins, her hair braided in the tribal style. Would they even recognize her as the woman they had left to die in the desert? The answer came soon enough. 3 riders emerged from the mist, moving cautiously into the clearing. They were trail-worn and mud-splattered, but their rifles were clean and ready in their hands. Sarah recognized the lead rider immediately, Ellis, Jeremiah Reynolds' foreman, the man who had abandoned her with the broken wagon. Behind her, Chetan stood motionless, a silent presence radiating controlled danger. Out of sight, she knew, a dozen warriors waited for any sign of threat. Ellis reined in his horse, eyes widening slightly as he recognized her. "Mrs. Reynolds," he called, his voice carrying an artificial heartiness that didn't reach his watchful eyes. "Thank the Lord we found you alive." "No thanks to you," Sarah replied evenly. "You left me to die." The foreman had the grace to look uncomfortable. "There's been a misunderstanding, ma'am. We were separated in that dust storm, couldn't find you nowhere. Been searching for weeks." The lie was so blatant that Sarah almost laughed. "Strange how you searched in exactly the wrong direction until now." Ellis dismounted slowly, handing his reins to one of his companions. He approached with exaggerated caution, eyes flicking to Chetan and back to Sarah. "Your father-in-law is sick with worry, ma'am. Sent us to bring you and the little ones home safe." "My father-in-law ordered you to abandon me in the desert," Sarah corrected him. "But he wants my sons, doesn't he? The Reynolds heirs." Ellis dropped the pretense, his expression hardening. "Those boys belong at the ranch, with their family. Mr. Reynolds has rights." "They belong with their mother." Chetan spoke for the first time, his deep voice carrying quiet authority. Ellis glanced at him dismissively. "This ain't your business, Indian. The woman and children are under our protection," Chetan replied, unruffled. "That makes it our business." The foreman's hand drifted toward his holstered pistol. Immediately, the atmosphere in the clearing changed. A dozen warriors emerged from concealment, bows drawn, rifles aimed. Ellis froze, suddenly aware of how completely outmatched they were. "Tell Jeremiah Reynolds that his grandchildren are safe and well cared for," Sarah said into the tense silence. "Tell him that if he truly wants what's best for them, he'll let them grow up in peace." "He won't accept that," Ellis warned, though his bravado had diminished considerably. "He'll bring the cavalry next time." "The cavalry is already hunting." "It's for other reasons," Chetan said with grim humor. "They have not found us yet." Rain streamed down Sarah's face, cold rivulets that matched the ice in her veins. This moment, this confrontation, clarified everything. There could be no return to her old world, no compromise with the man who had tried to murder her for his own ambition. "Go back, Ellis," she said quietly. "Tell him I died in the desert just as he intended. Tell him the children died with me. Let him mourn what he threw away." "And if I don't?" the foreman challenged, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. Sarah drew Chetan's knife, the blade catching dull light even in the rain. "Then you won't leave this valley to tell him anything?" For a long moment, no one moved. The only sounds were the gentle patter of rain and the distant rumble of thunder rolling through the mountains. Then Ellis stepped back, hands raised slightly. "You've changed, Mrs. Reynolds," he observed, something like reluctant respect in his tone. "Time was you wouldn't say boo to a goose." "Motherhood changes a woman," Sarah replied. "So does betrayal." Ellis mounted his horse with deliberate movements, signaling his companions to turn around. "This ain't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. "Yes," Sarah countered. "It is." They watched in silence as the three riders disappeared back into the rain and mist. Only when they were long gone did the warriors lower their weapons, melting back into the camp with quiet efficiency. Sarah stood motionless in the rain, the knife still clutched in her hand, emotions coursing through her too rapidly to name. Chetan gently took the blade from her trembling fingers. "You were brave," he said simply. "I was terrified," she corrected him. "But I couldn't let them threaten your people. Not after everything you've done for us." Something shifted in his expression. A softening around the eyes, a lessening of the guard he kept so carefully in place. "Our people," he said quietly, "if that is what you choose." The rain began to ease, patches of blue appearing between racing clouds. From the caves, people were emerging, children darting out to splash in newly formed puddles, women calling them back with fond exasperation. Life resuming its rhythm, adaptable as water finding its course around obstacles. Sarah moved toward the lodge where she had left the twins, Chetan falling into step beside her. Inside, they found Wachui singing softly to the boys, who were awake, but content, tiny hands waving in the air as if conducting their own private symphony. They knew nothing of danger, Wachui observed. Good medicine. Sarah knelt beside the cradle board, touching each son's cheek with gentle fingers. "They'll face enough dangers in their lives," she said. "Let them have peace while they can." That evening, as the band gathered around the central fire for the last night before their journey north, Sarah took her place not as a guest or outsider, but as one of them. The twins were passed from arm to arm, admired and blessed by elders, who pronounced them strong, destined for greatness. Running Bear approached her as the celebration wound down, his aged face solemn in the firelight. "My sister says you face the white men with courage," he said, his English careful but clear, "that you chose to protect the people, even at risk to yourself." Sarah inclined her head respectfully. "Your people protected us when we had nothing. How could I do less? The chief nodded slowly. A pony says you have made your decision. I have. Sarah looked around the circle. At Kimimela, teaching younger girls a dance. At Wachui, sharing stories with a group of children. At a pony, sorting medicines by the fire. And finally at Chatan, watching her from across the flames with quiet intensity. If you will have us, we would travel north with the band, Running Bear's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. The people have already accepted you and the little ones. The question was only whether you would accept us. I know the path won't be easy, Sarah acknowledged. There will be hardships, dangers. There are hardships on all paths, the chief replied with the wisdom of his years. But those faced alone are heavier than those shared among many hands. As the fire burned low and the camp settled for the night, Sarah sat outside her lodge, watching stars emerge in the clearing sky. The twins slept peacefully within, their new names settling around them like protective mantles. Soft footsteps approached, Chatan bringing an extra blanket against the post-rain chill. "You're certain of your decision?" he asked, settling beside her on a fallen log. "As certain as anyone can be of anything in this world," she replied. "My sons will learn both ways, their fathers and their adopted peoples. They'll carry both worlds within them." Chatan was silent for a moment, contemplating the stars above. "It will not be simple," he said finally. "There will be those among us who never fully accept them, or you, and the white world will always see them as between, belonging nowhere completely. Or belonging everywhere," Sarah countered, "seeing with eyes that understand both sides." She turned to face him directly. "What about you, Chatan? Do you have doubts about my choice?" His expression, usually so guarded, opened to her like a night flower blooming. "When I found you in the desert, I thought only to honor my wife's memory by saving what she could not be saved." He looked toward the lodge where the twins slept. "I did not expect to find my own healing in yours." The simplicity of his words, the depth of feeling behind them, touched Sarah in a place she had thought forever closed after Thomas's death. Not romantic love. It was too soon, too complicated for that, but a connection, a possibility that someday hearts might mend enough to risk opening again. "We leave at dawn," Chatan said, rising. "The journey north will be difficult, especially with little ones. We'll manage," Sarah replied with newfound confidence. "One day at a time." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "One day at a time," he agreed. "That is how all great journeys are made." As he walked away, Sarah remained beneath the stars, feeling not the closure of one chapter but the opening of another. Tomorrow they would travel north, away from the soldiers' roots, away from Jeremiah Reynolds's reach, toward a future unknown but faced together. The sacred waters had healed more than her body. They had washed away fear, leaving in its place a quietly growing certainty. Whatever came next, whether years of peace or new challenges, she and her sons were no longer alone in facing it. For a woman who had been abandoned in the Badlands to die, there could be no greater victory than that. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.